In lieu of the all-MLB team announcement on the day of this recording and many Twitter wars about this particular subject, I decided I had to make a video on this. Salvador Perez is the most overrated player in baseball. There, I said it. He's coming off his 10th season in the major leagues. He hit .273 with a .316 on base percentage, a .544 slugging, 48 homers, 121 RBIs, good for a 127 weighted runs created plus, and 3.4 Fangraphs WAR. All in all, a pretty good season. But guess what? He made the all-MLB first team, and I have an issue with that. I don't think he was the best catcher in baseball this year. In fact, I can name several who were better. But I won't spend this entire video ragging on the negative aspects of Salvador Perez because he did do a lot of things very well this season. One of those being that he was terrific at hitting home runs. He had more home runs than any other majority catcher in Major League history with 48, surpassing Johnny Bench's mark. Considering that home runs are the most important thing in baseball and the most valuable single thing that you can do on a baseball field, that is still impressive. As well, Salvador Perez played in 161 games this season, with the majority of them being at catcher. That is impressive. Staying healthy for an entire season and only missing one game the entire year as a primary catcher is very difficult, even if he did DH for a lot of the season. However, there were glaring negatives to his season as well. His walk percentage was only 4.2%. That is dreadful considering the major league average is around 8%. His strikeout percentage was 25.6%. Not usually an issue if your walk rate is also high, but his isn't. Combined, this led to only a .316 on base percentage. Again, on base percentage is not an end-all be-all stat. It does not account for power well enough to be considered one of the best stats that you can use to evaluate a hitter. However, it still goes into the overall calculation of his offensive value this season, which, while very good, a 127 weighted runs created plus is well above the average mark for a catcher in a single season, is not nearly as elite and extraordinary as people think. Salvador Perez was also terrible defensively. His pitch framing was absolutely dreadful. During the 2021 season, his framing runs value was negative 19.5. This means that with framing alone, Salvador Perez cost his team 19.5 runs during the season. And while I understand if you can be doubtful about framing, we're going to use Ryan Domit, a notoriously terrible defensive catcher, as an example. During Domit's career, he caught more than 4,000 innings. When Domit was catching, the pitchers allowed 5.34 runs per 9 innings. When someone else was catching, the pitchers allowed 4.90 runs per 9 innings. Over Domit's innings total, the difference equals to 213 runs over his career. How many runs was Ryan Domit docked for being a poor pitch framer? Almost 200. Considering that the catcher is the most important defensive position on the field, this is a glaring problem, especially for someone with a reputation previously of being good defensively, considering that Salvador Perez has 5 Gold Gloves to his name. Salvador Perez is also a below-average base runner with negative 0.8 base running runs in the season, meaning he cost his team a single run during the season. Not too terrible for a catcher, but still not great. Combine all of these things together, and again, Salvador Perez is worth 3.4 Fangraphs WAR. Still a pretty good number, especially for a catcher. In fact, it ranks 6th among catchers in Major League Baseball this season. But again, not extraordinary by any means, and perhaps not deserving of the all-MLB first team. The 5 catchers ranked above Salvador Perez all had much fewer plate appearances than Salvador Perez, including Buster Posey leading the way with 4.9 Fangraphs WAR and only 454 plate appearances compared to Salvador Perez's 665. Perhaps the most striking name on this list is Yasmani Grandal, who only played in 93 games on the season, accrued only 375 plate appearances, and was worth more value. This again leads into the home runs debate amongst catchers. Yes, home runs are very important. As I've mentioned earlier, they are the single best thing that you can do on a baseball field. They are the single most valuable thing that you can possibly do. And hitting 48 of them is a big deal. Salvador Perez was better at hitting them than any catcher in Major League history. I think the point to be made here, however, is that if he did not hit these home runs, if he hit home runs at, say, an average rate, Salvador Perez would be amongst the worst catchers in baseball. At a certain point, other stats combining together, particularly defensively for the most important defensive position on the diamond, makes up for the lack of home runs compared to Salvador Perez and the lack of volume too, or else you'd not be seeing these players that are ahead of him with more value. Keep in mind that WAR is a cumulative stat. it is not a rate stat, it adds the more that you play. So considering that the 5 players ahead of him all had much fewer plate appearances and still finished with more cumulative value than Salvador Perez speaks volumes. Personally, I would have gone with Buster Posey for the first team and Will Smith for the second team. I think that they were clearly the 2 best catchers in baseball this season that also accrued a ton of volume. Posey had 454 plate appearances and Will Smith had 501, much greater than, say, Mike Zunino's 375 and Grandal also with his 375 plate appearances. And to be honest, I don't really understand well, it's close, so it's not that big of a deal. My problem is that Salvador Perez was just worse than the other catchers. He did one thing well this season, which again is the most important thing, hitting home runs, but he did nothing else well. He struck out a lot, he did not walk at all, he was a poor defensive catcher, again at the most important position on the diamond, and he was not a good base runner. Once again, this is not to rag on Salvador Perez. He is a very solid player. 3.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement is not a number to scoff at for a catcher, but to say that he was the best catcher in baseball this season, to me, is incorrect.